A Four Corners investigation has found serious problems in Australia's fertility industry, with a lack of accountability from corporate IVF clinics when things go wrong. The peak body and regulator has announced a major review of governance and standards in the sector. It aims to establish a uniform national law to replace more than 30 different pieces of legislation currently governing the lucrative industry. Four Corners reporter Grace Tobin has more.
So one of the worst cases that we've looked into is that of Anastasia and Lexi Gunn. They used one of the biggest IVF clinics in Australia to conceive their three boys. They all were, they paid for donor sperm to be used in each of the case. They wanted the same sperm donor used across all of the three boys. But DNA testing now shows that the oldest boy doesn't actually match with the two youngest sons. And importantly, the two youngest sons actually have serious health conditions as well on top of that. So it's been a real shock to them. It's something that's been unearthed through DNA testing. And the couple's really at this stage fighting to get an understanding from the clinic exactly how this happened.
And when things like this go wrong, what happens? Where's the transparency? Is there any accountability in the process?
Yeah, look, some of the cases we've looked at are certainly at the severe end of the scale, but what links them all is the response of these big corporate clinics. And there does seem to be this theme of a lack of accountability and transparency. In the case that I was just telling you about, for instance, the mums themselves have had to become sort of like detectives in trying to figure out what has gone wrong, because the clinic hasn't accepted any responsibility and there's very few avenues that they can actually turn to for answers.
And I understand you've been talking to quite a few different families who engaged with these IVF services. Tell us about some of the other ones.
Look, I mean, some of the ones that we've looked at, there was a really horrible incident in Sydney last year involving a lab contamination which resulted in 3 different families having their precious embryos destroyed, which was traumatic in itself. But then on top of that, these families have been fighting for 10 months to get some answer and some closure into exactly how that took place. Another incident, there's been a serial donor unearthed who has potentially 700 offspring around Australia. One of his offspring is looking at trying to get medical information out to all of her siblings, and the clinics aren't helping there. And then there's another clinic that's failed to inform patients of potential genetic issues with the donor.
And now we've got this regulator review that's been announced. Tell us about that.
So there is a national regulator called RTAC, but it's not independent. It's run under the industry body called the Fertility Society of Australia. We went to the Fertility Society asking them in regards to these cases, why is it that the regulator actually can't do more when it comes to patient complaints? And they've told us that it does recognise that really there are some failings there and there are some criticisms there regarding its effectiveness as an industry regulator. So it's announced a major review of governance and standards within the sector, and that's being led by former Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt. It's looking at trying to have a uniform national approach. Right now, it's different in every state and territory in Australia. There's 30 different pieces of legislation, and it just doesn't seem that when patients have a problem, there's very few places that they can go to.
Really important reporting, Grace Tobin. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can catch Four Corners tonight on ABC TV at 8:30 or anytime on ABC iView.